The wealth gap isn't about income, so you've got two people. Person A makes $95,000 a year. They've got a nice apartment, lease a decent car, go out to eat a few times a week. But here's the thing, they're one unexpected $2,000 expense away from having to put it on a credit card. Person B makes $65,000 a year. Smaller apartment, older car they own outright, cooks at home most nights, but they got $30,000 sitting in various accounts, and if they wanted to quit their job tomorrow and take 3 months to find something better, they could. Now, here's my question. Which person is actually wealthier? If you said person B, you're starting to understand what almost nobody talks about when it comes to the wealth gap in America. And if you said person A because they make more money, well, stay with me because we need to talk. My name is Wind, and I spend way too much time thinking about why people who make good money still feel broke while others seem to have financial freedom on half the income. If you're someone who's ever felt like you're doing everything right financially but still can't seem to get ahead, or you're making more money than ever but somehow have less breathing room, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Look, we've been sold this lie that the wealth gap is about income, that rich people have money and poor people don't, and the problem is just that some people make $40,000 and others make $400,000. And yeah, income matters. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it doesn't, but here's what most people don't realize. Income is just the water flowing into your bucket. Wealth is about the size of your bucket, whether it has holes in it, and most importantly, what you can do with the water you've managed to keep. The real wealth gap in America, it's not about who makes more money. It's about who has options. And optionality, the ability to make choices about your life without financial desperation, forcing your hand, that's the actual dividing line between the rich and everyone else. Let me explain what I mean by optionality, because this is where it gets really interesting. Optionality is basically the financial freedom to choose. It's the ability to say no to a job that's slowly killing your soul. It's being able to wait for the right opportunity instead of taking the first one that comes along. It's having the breathing room to negotiate your salary instead of accepting whatever they offer because you need the money by next month. It's being able to invest in an opportunity when it appears, instead of watching it pass by because you're living paycheck to paycheck. And here's the thing that's going to make you angry. The system is specifically designed to give optionality to people who already have it and take it away from people who don't. Let me show you exactly how this works with some real numbers, because the math here is honestly kind of infuriating. Let's take two people again. Call them Sarah and Mike. Sarah makes $75,000 a year. Mike makes $75,000 a year. Same income, right? So they should end up in roughly the same place financially? Wrong. Sarah graduated college with $45,000 in student loans. She's paying $430 a month for the next 10 years. She's renting an apartment for $1,250 a month because she can't afford a down payment on a house. She's got a car payment of $380 because her old car died and she needed something reliable to get to work. Health insurance through her employer costs her $220 a month. She's got about $2,000 in credit card debt from when she was between jobs last year, costing her another $80 a month in minimum payments. Mike, his parents paid for college, no student loans. When he needed his first apartment, his parents helped with the security deposit and first month's rent. When his car died, his parents helped him buy a reliable used car, outright, no payment. His parents are wealthy enough that they kept him on their health insurance until he was 26 and got a job with good benefits. When he was between jobs, he moved back home for 3 months instead of racking up credit card debt. Same income. But Sarah has $2,160 in mandatory monthly payments that Mike doesn't have. That's $33,120 a year. For the same salary, Sarah is effectively living on $41,080 while Mike is living on $75,000. But it gets worse. Because Sarah can't save for a down payment on a house, she's paying rent money that disappears forever. Mike saved up and bought a small condo. His mortgage payment is actually $200 less than Sarah's rent, but more importantly, he's building equity. After 5 years, Sarah has paid $99,000 in rent and has nothing to show for it. Mike has paid $87,000 in mortgage payments and has about $40,000 in equity, plus his condo has appreciated by another $35,000. Same income, but Mike is $174,000 ahead of Sarah after just 5 years. Now, here's where optionality comes in. Sarah gets a job offer in another city. It's a better opportunity, $15,000 more per year, but she'd have to break her lease early. That's a $1,650 penalty. She'd have to pay for movers or rent a truck. She'd need first month's rent and security deposit in the new city before she gets her old deposit back. She'd need money to live on during the transition. All told, the move would cost her about $6,000 that she doesn't have. So she stays put, missing out on $15,000 more per year. Mike gets the same offer. He lists his condo, sells it in 3 weeks, walks away with $75,000 in equity after paying off his mortgage and closing costs. He uses $10,000 of that for the move and puts $20,000 down on a new place. He's got options. He moves, takes a better job, and his career trajectory changes. Same starting income. Completely different outcomes. Not because of merit, not because of work ethic, not because of intelligence, because one person had optionality and the other didn't. Now you might be thinking, okay, Win, but Sarah just needs to budget better and save more money, right? And look, I get it. That's what we've been taught. Just save more. Make a budget. Cut out the lattes. Bootstrap yourself to wealth. But here's what most financial advice completely ignores. When you don't have optionality, every financial decision you make is a bad one. Not because you're making bad choices, but because all your options are bad. Your car breaks down and you need $200 for repairs. You don't have $200. So what are your options? Put it on a credit card at 22% interest. Take out a payday loan at 400% APR. Skip the repairs and risk losing your job because you can't get to work. Every single option makes your situation worse. The responsible choice would be to have an emergency fund, but you can't build an emergency fund when you're already behind. This is what I call the poverty tax. When you don't have optionality, everything costs more. You can't buy in bulk because you don't have the cash up front, so you pay more per unit. You can't afford preventive maintenance, so you pay for emergency repairs. You can't afford to shop around for insurance or negotiate better rates because you need coverage now. You overdraft your account once and suddenly you're paying $35 in fees, which causes another overdraft, and now you're in a spiral. A 2019 study from the JP Morgan Chase Institute found that the median family has about $20,900 in checking and savings accounts at any given time. But here's the kicker. 40% of families saw their liquid assets drop to less than $400 at least once during the year. That's below the cost of most emergency expenses. One surprise bill and they're in trouble. And this is where it gets really interesting because the system doesn't just fail to help people without optionality, it actively extracts wealth from them. Let me give you some numbers that should make you genuinely angry. Poor people pay more for financial services. A 2019 report from the Financial Health Network found that Americans spent $173 billion annually on fees and interest for financial products, but it's not evenly distributed. Low-income households spend roughly 10% of their income on fees and interest. High-income households spend less than 1%. Think about that. The people who can least afford it are paying 10 times more as a percentage of income just for the privilege of being poor. Check cashing fees, payday loans, overdraft fees, late payment fees, higher insurance premiums because they can't pay annually, higher interest rates on everything because they don't have perfect credit, no access to tax advantage retirement accounts because they're living paycheck to paycheck, no employer 401k match because they work multiple part-time jobs instead of one full-time job. Meanwhile, wealthy people get wealth almost for free. You know what the interest rate on a mortgage is if you have excellent credit and put 20% down? Right now it's around 6.57%. You know what the interest rate is on a credit card if you have bad credit? 29.99%. The person who already has money pays 7% to borrow. The person who desperately needs money pays 30%. And here's the really insidious part. Wealth creates more wealth automatically. If you have $100,000 sitting in index funds, you do nothing. And historically, you make about $10,000 a year on average just from market returns. You make $10,000 for doing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, someone working a 10-an-hour job has to work 1,000 hours, 6 months of full-time work to make that same $10,000. But wait, it gets worse because optionality compounds just like interest does. Remember Mike, who had options? When he sold his condo and moved for the better job, he's now making $90,000 instead of $75,000. That extra $15,000 means he can max out his 401k contribution and get a full employer match. That's $22,500 going into retirement accounts every year between his contributions and the match. Sarah, still making $75,000 and still struggling with debt payments, can afford to put in 3% to get the employer match. That's $4,500 a year going into retirement. After 25 years, assuming 7% annual returns, Mike has $1.5 million in his 401k. Sarah has $300,000, same starting income. But Mike started with optionality, which gave him more options, which gave him even more optionality. This is how wealth gaps don't just exist, they accelerate over time. It's not a gap, it's an exponential divergence. So let's talk about what this actually means for the wealth gap in America, because the numbers are honestly staggering. According to the Federal Reserve's 2022 survey of consumer finances, the median net worth of the top 10% of earners was $3.8 million. The median net worth of the bottom 50%, $61,000. And here's the thing, a lot of that $61,000 is home equity for people who managed to buy before housing prices exploded. The median liquid wealth actual money you can access for the bottom 50% is closer to $10,000. But even that doesn't capture the real story, because within each income bracket, there's massive variation based on optionality. Let me give you a concrete example. There's this phenomenon that researchers call asset poverty. You can make a middle-class income but be asset poor, meaning you don't have enough liquid assets to sustain yourself at the poverty line for 3 months if you lost your income. A 2023 report from Prosperity Now found that 37% of households in America are asset poor, not income poor, asset poor. They make enough money to live, but they have no cushion, no buffer, no optionality. And this breaks down in predictable ways. About 60% of Black households and 57% of Latino households are asset poor, compared to 26% of white households. Not because of income differences alone, but because of generational wealth gaps, historical discrimination in housing and lending, and unequal access to the kind of family support that Mike had in our earlier example. Here's where this all comes together. We tell this story in America that anyone can make it if they just work hard enough. And look, I'm not going to tell you that hard work doesn't matter. It does. But here's what most people don't realize. When we talk about economic mobility, we're usually talking about income mobility. Can you make more money than your parents did? But income mobility without wealth mobility is kind of meaningless. You can make $100,000 a year and still have less optionality than someone making $50,000 if you're drowning in debt, don't have savings, and are locked into financial commitments that consume your entire income. A study from the Brookings Institution found that about 40% of people who grow up in the bottom income quintile stay there as adults. But here's what's really wild. Of the people who do climb out of the bottom quintile, most of them don't accumulate significant wealth. They increase their income, but not their optionality. They make more money, but they're still living paycheck to paycheck, just with a nicer car and a bigger apartment. Real economic mobility, the kind that actually changes your life, requires wealth mobility. And wealth mobility requires optionality. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, Wind, I get it, the system is rigged, but what am I supposed to do about it? I can't change my past. I can't magically give myself wealthy parents. And you're right, you can't. But here's the thing. Understanding how optionality works gives you a completely different framework for making financial decisions. Most financial advice tells you to maximize your income, get the highest paying job, negotiate your salary, climb the ladder, and yeah, that matters. But if you understand optionality, you realize that building wealth is less about maximizing income and more about minimizing the things that destroy optionality. So let me give you a different framework for thinking about money. Instead of asking, how can I make more? Start by asking, how can I build optionality? Here's what that actually looks like. First, ruthlessly eliminate mandatory monthly payments. Every recurring payment is a claim on your future income, and every claim reduces your options. Student loans, car payments, credit card debt, these aren't just financial drains, they're optionality killers. Yeah, paying off a car loan at 5% interest isn't the mathematically optimal move if you could invest that money at 10%, but it gives you options. It gives you one less thing you have to pay for every single month. Second, build cash reserves even if it's suboptimal. I know the math says you should invest extra money instead of sitting on cash that loses value to inflation. But you know what cash gives you? Options. The ability to take risks. The ability to wait for the right opportunity instead of taking the first one. The ability to walk away from a bad situation. Aim for 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account. Yeah, you might lose some returns, but you gain optionality, and optionality is worth more than 2 to 3% in extra returns. Third, make career decisions based on optionality, not just salary. A job that pays $10,000 more but requires a brutal commute, has no flexibility, and offers no room for growth. That reduces your optionality. A job that pays slightly less but gives you skills, flexibility, and opens doors, that increases your optionality. Think about your career as building options, not just climbing a ladder. Fourth, be strategic about debt. Not all debt is bad. A mortgage on a house you can actually afford, that can build optionality by locking in your housing costs and building equity. Student loans for a degree that leads to a high-paying career, that can work. But debt for consumption financing a lifestyle you can't actually afford destroys optionality. Every dollar you owe is a dollar of future income that's already spent. Fifth, invest in yourself in ways that compound. Education, skills, health, relationships, these all build optionality over time. They give you more choices, more paths, more ways to create value. The guy who spent 3 months learning to code and can now freelance if he loses his job has more optionality than the guy making twice as much who has no skills outside his current role. Look, I want to be clear about something. Individual action matters. The choices you make about money matter. But we also have to be honest about the fact that the system itself is designed in a way that makes it exponentially harder for some people to build optionality than others. If you started with student debt, no family safety net, and limited access to good jobs with benefits, you're playing the game on hard mode. That's not your fault, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. But you do have to acknowledge it so you can be strategic about how you play. The people who started with optionality, whether from family wealth, good luck, or being born into the right circumstances, are playing on easy mode. They make mistakes and bounce back. They take risks and have safety nets. They build wealth almost accidentally while others struggle to survive despite working just as hard. So here's what I want you to take away from this. The wealth gap isn't really about money. It's about options. It's about having the financial freedom to make choices based on what's best for you, not what's least bad among terrible options. Every financial decision you make should be evaluated through this lens. Does this increase my optionality or decrease it? Does this give me more choices or fewer choices? Am I building toward freedom or locking myself into constraint? Because here's the truth. You might not be able to fix the system. You might not be able to change the fact that wealth begets wealth and poverty begets poverty. But you can understand the game, you can see how it works, and you can make choices that give you more options instead of fewer. Start today. Not tomorrow, not next month, today. Look at your finances and ask, what's killing my optionality right now? Is it debt? Is it a lack of savings? Is it a job that pays well but traps me? Whatever it is, make a plan to change it. Not all at once, that's not realistic. But bit by bit, dollar by dollar, decision by decision. Build optionality. Because optionality is freedom. And freedom, the ability to choose your own path instead of being forced down, one by financial desperation, that's what wealth actually is. If this changed how you think about money, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and let me know what's currently destroying your optionality and what you're going to do about it. And give this video a thumbs up so more people can understand that the wealth gap isn't really about income, it's about options and who has them. I'll see you in the next one.